Good morning. Today is the last Sunday after the Epiphany. It's the last Sunday before Lent begins. It's the last Sunday that we will sing or say Alleluia during the church service until we gather again on Easter morning. But everyone knows today as Super Bowl Sunday. And here's my promise to you. I'm not going to make any cheesy Super Bowl jokes, and no Travis and Taylor jokes. I won't mention that my dear Eagles are not in the game tonight, even though they started 10-1. I'm not even going to mention that. We have important things to get to, so let's get to it. There is a consistent theme in the New Testament and in the Gospels that shows up time and time again, and it's a word. And the word means look. It gets obscured by the fact that translators, when they translate it into English, don't like just saying look, 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 look all the time. That's boring. And so they try and mix it up and use watch and see, or that great biblical word, behold. They're just different ways of saying look. And the theology and spirituality of looking is everywhere. When Jesus calls Andrew to be a disciple, Andrew has some questions for him, and Jesus says to him, come and see, or come and look. A few verses later, Philip and Nathanael are talking, and Nathanael's saying, look, I think I've found the Messiah, and he's from Nazareth. And Nathanael says, what, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And Philip says, come and see. In today's gospel lesson, Jesus takes his closest three, the inner circle of the disciples, Peter, James, and John, up onto the high mountaintop where he is transfigured before them, and they see him differently in a way they have never seen him before. They're used to just normal, regular old Jesus, son of a carpenter, itinerant preacher. Now he's bright, shining like the sun, and there with Moses and Elijah. And Peter, James, and John are so stunned, they're so terrified that Peter starts speaking gibberish. He doesn't know what to say. And at the end, when Jesus returns to his normal appearance, Jesus has to say to them, look, don't tell anyone about this until later. You guys are obviously freaked out, and we don't want to freak anybody else out. Let's hold that off for later. Towards the end of Jesus' ministry, in the last week of his life, before Good Friday, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is teaching, and he gives that great parable where he says, when you feed someone who is hungry, you're not just feeding that person, but you're feeding me. When you give someone who is thirsty something to drink, you're not just giving that person a drink, you're giving me a drink. When you welcome a stranger, someone you don't even know, into your midst, you're not just welcoming that person, you're welcoming me. Like, you might not see me in the person who's in need, but I am there. On and around the resurrection, around Easter, there are all these things about sight. On the morning of Easter, Mary Magdalene makes it to the tomb. She sees the tomb is opened and that Jesus' body is not there. Her first thought is not, oh good, he's risen from the dead. That's the furthest thought from her mind. Her thought is that, oh my gosh, someone has taken Jesus' body. They've done terrible things to him on Good Friday. Now they're going to be doing terrible things to him now. And she's distraught, and she sees this figure. She assumes he's the gardener, and they start having a conversation back and forth, and it's not until the gardener speaks her name and says Mary that she realizes it's not the gardener, but it's Jesus. She didn't see it was Jesus until she saw it was Jesus. On the afternoon of Easter, 2 disciples are walking to Emmaus, and then this other fellow just starts walking with them, and Emmaus is like a 5-mile journey away, so they're walking for like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours in sandals in the desert, and they're talking to this stranger about Jesus the whole time. They get to Emmaus, and the stranger takes some bread, he gives thanks, he breaks it, and he gives it to them, and immediately their eyes are opened and they see it's not a stranger, but it's Jesus the whole time. Like, how do you walk with Jesus for miles after walking with him for 3 years and not know it was him? On the night of the resurrection, the disciples are gathered in the upper room, and Jesus comes and stands among them, risen. But Thomas missed the meeting, and he's not there, and Thomas comes back later, and the disciples are like, great news, Jesus has risen from the dead. And Thomas is like, well, you saw him, but I didn't see him, and unless I see the marks in his hand and in his side, I won't believe. In the book of Acts, Paul is on the road to Damascus. He's getting ready to go there and probably jail or worse some Christians. When he sees a blinding light, he hears the voice of Jesus. He falls off his horse and he's blinded for 3 days until something like scales fall from his eyes. And he who was once blind can now see. There's all these references to seeing. It's like the gospel authors are just bidding us to see deeper, to see clearer, to be on the lookout. And I think the part of the reason why that is, why they're so intent on this, is that the gospel authors are not writing, they're not writing journal entries. They're not writing the events as they're taking place. Like today, Jesus and us walked to the Sea of Galilee. They're writing decades after to people who would never have an opportunity to see Jesus of Nazareth again. I mean, once you've missed the Sermon on the Mount, you've missed it. It's over. Once you miss the feeding of the 5,000, you missed it. But what the gospel authors are saying is, even though you weren't there, you can still see Jesus. Jesus just might be in the face of the person you're talking to, you just don't know it. Jesus might be in the face of the person that you're serving, you just don't know it. You might gather around the table and break bread, and you might see Jesus there. Their message is that it doesn't matter if you live in the 1st century or the 21st century. It doesn't matter if you live in Jerusalem or San Francisco or Kansas City. What is this? That wasn't a cheesy Super Bowl reference. I was just naming some cities. You threw a flag? Mike, do you have the instant replay on that?
If it's the 1st century or the 21st century. It doesn't matter if it's Jerusalem or San Francisco.
It's just 3 cities.
Kansas
Give
City.
another angle on that. I want to see the other angle.
It doesn't matter if it's the 1st century or the 21st century. It doesn't
Do you have
matter
another
if
angle?
it's Jerusalem or San.
Look, I get my second foot down, I drag my toe, that's a reception. Do you have it in slow-mo?
San Francisco, Kansas City.
I mean, I think the case is pretty clear.
After review, the rector did, he made a cheesy Super Bowl. He made a cheesy Super Bowl reference. A 2-minute penalty will be assessed on the end of the sermon. First down.
The refs have been terrible this year. Am I right? I mean, of course, the only thing that really matters is, was Taylor watching? She doesn't look happy about this call, gentlemen. Okay. Was I saying something? Something about Jesus, maybe? So, do you see Jesus around you? Do you see Jesus around you? Specifically, do you see little, like 1-inch tall Jesuses around you? So, 2 weeks ago, we had youth group in Sunday school, and after dinner, I stood up in front of them and I said, "Hey guys, where's Jesus?" And they all looked at me like I had 3 heads, like, I'm not sure what you mean by that. And I said, well, where's Jesus? Like, where is Jesus? And one brave youth group member said, everywhere? Yes, Jesus is everywhere. And then I asked, what about like the tough places? What about the places where bad things are going on? What about the places where there's war, or people are hurting each other, or people are sick? Is Jesus there? And the consensus of the group was yes, of course Jesus is there. In fact, Jesus is probably especially there in those places. And then I asked, but do you see him? Like, you say he's here, like, do you see him? And they were like, So then we talked about how it is sometimes easier to see Jesus in the rear view mirror. Years ago, when we used to go to Appalachia on the Appalachia Service Project, we would serve for a week there, fixing up homes for people who were living in deep rural poverty in West Virginia or Kentucky or Tennessee or Virginia. And at the end of the week, we would circle up and we would talk about where we saw Jesus. Where did we have our God moment? And it was always the most tear-filled moment as people went around the circle and talked about where they did see Jesus, in the face of the people they were serving, in the face of the grandparent or the parent or the child or the cat or the dog or the rooster that happened to be at the house. Jesus was there. Or they saw Jesus in the face of the person that they were serving beside. Or they saw Jesus in a moment of serendipity as they were serving with each other. It's so much easier to see where Jesus was than where Jesus is. And that's fine. And we also need to be watching, to be looking. I say one of my spiritual practices is when I am going into a tough situation. And as a priest, sometimes we go into tough situations. Someone is dying, or someone has died, or someone's received terrible news. And as I'm driving to the hospital or I'm driving to the person's home, I'm praying, Jesus, I need to see you. When I'm in that hospital room, sometimes I will literally, you might see me just go like this, like looking for Jesus. Our youth group and Sunday school hid these little Jesuses all over the church as a reminder to all of you that Jesus is everywhere. And that where Jesus is, all the things that come with Jesus are too, like grace and mercy and peace and hope and forgiveness and redemption and love. And that when we look for Jesus, we also might seek and find those things too in a world and in a life that so desperately needs them. So we hid 50 little Jesuses through the church. And you are welcome to find those 50 little Jesuses and take them home. I also have a bowl here of about 120 little Jesuses, little extra Jesuses. And my challenge to you is, we did not practice this. We have another flat. There was no reference to the bowl, but it's not a Super Bowl.
The challenge isn't for you, Rick. The challenge is for everybody out there.
It's your challenge. Your challenge is to take Jesus with you and maybe plant him on your desk or plant him on your bedside table or on your dresser or on top of your TV, wherever you need to see him. Or perhaps you're brave and you could take maybe your Jesus or a fistful of Jesuses out into the world and stick them on your desk at work or in your cubicle or at Starbucks or perched atop a bag of potato chips at ShopRite, because maybe someone else needs to see Jesus. Maybe someone else needs to be reminded of the grace and the mercy and the truth and the hope and the redemption and the love that is in this man. So the last 2 minutes of my sermon were going to be amazing. The last two services just wept through them, but Roger said, I can't give them. So I'm just going to cut right to the end and say, go and see. Amen.